Well, good morning. It's good to have all of you here this morning. So thank you for joining us. This is the last chapter of this book. And so we've gone, how many weeks would this be? Probably close to 20 weeks, maybe 18, 14 chapters. And then some chapters we needed 2 or 3, podcasts to get through to understand what's going on in the chapter and to treat each chapter, I think, more fairly. So we are in this final chapter, and it's shorter, and it's probably the most dense theologically, philosophically, in some respects. And to be able to unpack it entirely is really way outside the kind of like the scope of what we're really trying to get to here. So I'm going to treat this chapter in some senses with a rather thumbnail sketch, because I don't want to get people bogged down into pretty challenging concepts and ideas. And so I hope that's okay with you, but we will try to extract from it what we can that will be helpful and applicable to us. I might mention also that I have a bit of a head and chest cold, so hopefully I'll be able to hold out and be okay. So, but if I have a sneeze or a cough or whatever, just forgive me for that. But I wanted to get this in and to keep some kind of continuity because we couldn't do it last week. So I hope that's all good with you. So if you read chapter 14, it's very important to remember what took place in the beginning of the book. And one of the things that's just really crucial to remember what took place in the beginning of the book is how hell and heaven are described in terms of their environment, not the least of which is how light appeared to them. So in hell, the place that all of the phantoms or ghosts lived was called Greytown. And it was a brooding kind of place. It was a place where it just seemed as if things were on the edge. Something was about to happen. And the people who lived there were afraid of what they didn't know exactly what it was. But they did have this sense of impending doom. So it was always dusk. It was always dusk, as if what little light they had left would go completely away, and then they would be, whatever was left of them, would be stuck in Stygian darkness, evaporating, eliminating any wisp of hope that remained. So you had that on one side, and then on the other side, you had this sense of, in heaven, a sense of hope that that the light there was bright and golden, and it was in a perpetual state of dawn. So dusk, dawn, where the whole of the light would come and reveal everything. And while the light of what there was remained in hell was cold and unappealing and uncomfortable, the light in heaven was, as with dawn, there was a sense of hope and warmth. And in the fullness of that light, maybe even heat, but not heat that destroys, but heat that reveals. So perhaps one of the best examples you might get of that would be the young man who struggled with lust and had a lizard on his shoulder, and the angel, which was nothing but light and fire, grabbed the lizard, which was symbolic of lust, and that light incinerated the lizard, and then it morphed into this great stallion. It was redeemed. It was restored into what it should have been in the first place. This glorious stallion. And so beautiful, powerful, compelling. And so in that context, then you get this image of, lust was this scaly little jabbering lizard that hung out on this young man's shoulder. But when the angel took it, twisted it, and broke it, and removed its power in that way, then it was transformed into something far more glorious looking. And that's the way, and it's a commentary, that's the way all sin is in our lives. That whatever sin is manifested in our lives, it's manifested through something that has the capacity that was originally intended to be glorious, beautiful, powerful, compelling. And that when it's impacted by sin, it gets twisted and contorted and shrunken into something other than what it should be. And so in this case, in that young man's case, so it was with lust. So, any sin that you can think of. So I'll say this, and this is a little bit of a rabbit trail, but people who are paralyzed by sin in their life, hello, Ruth. People who are paralyzed by sin in their life, they'll say, well, that's a weakness of mine. And in a sense, that's true. But in reality, it's a great strength that has been highly corrupted. And so that reoccurring sin that people struggle with in their life is always connected to some great strength that's been compromised and corrupted by sin. Because it's a great sin that makes up more of the essence of who we are. That's why it's difficult once it's corrupted. That's why it's difficult to be overcome. Does this make sense? If that doesn't make sense, sign in there and tell me. And so that's the image of the lizard and the stallion that we read earlier in the book. In any case, what we have here is we have these polarities, these two opposite places. One that is much, incredibly a gazillion times squared bigger than what hell itself is. And in the heaven scenario, light is just over top of the mountains, just as if it's about ready to, the full effect of dawn is about to come upon that part of heaven. And that represents the second coming. So there's this anticipation in heaven that light is about to rise above the mountains, and the whole of that part of heaven is going to feel the full effect of the light of the sun. And simultaneously then, when that light rises, the light in hell is gone. It's extinguished. It goes away. And the people there are left in the bitter cold, deep darkness, and for all of that for eternity. So we come then to the last chapter, and it's the main character, MacDonald, the dwarf and tragedian, and the woman named Sarah Smith. And this launches them into a conversation about why the dwarf, I believe his name is Edward, could not be saved. He actually went back to hell. And so they talked about And we had, I think, a fascinating conversation. And again, chapter 13 of this book is one of my most favorite chapters in all of script, of anything that I've ever read. It's just a fascinating chapter. And I think that, Lewis has it really right. And so that sets up the stage for this conversation that's happening. And I'm going to read through it. And I'm just going to skip over certain portions of it because it's just so dense. But there are other parts of it that are so obvious and real that apply to us. And so I want to take the time to do that. But before I do that, I just, because like I said, this is about the second coming, in essence. So this main character is in heaven to be given the opportunity to stay in heaven. And so as he walks with MacDonald, and MacDonald mentors him and instructs him, it just so happens that while they're in the middle of that conversation, as they have been talking for a while now, the Lord comes back, and the sun rises above the mountains in heaven, and the light goes out in hell itself. So here are some helpful texts, I think, that you can read that get to this idea. So this is Revelation 20, verses 11 through 15, if you're taking notes. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and the books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books, according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. So it was believed back then that if you were lost at sea, there was no resurrection. There was absolutely no hope for you at all. That once you sunk into the sea, there was no, you were helpless. You were forever gone. And so when it says here, and the sea gave up the dead who were in it, John is basically saying that in this event, the power of God transcends even your belief of what happens to people in the sea. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. So there's this judgment where death and Hades give up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. So I think that Lewis is playing with this idea, this theme that you'll see in the book itself. I think Lewis is working with this idea here. So 1 Thessalonians 5:2, for you yourselves are fully aware that the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night. So nobody in hell and in heaven knew exactly when the sun would rise and the light would disappear. But there was always this sense of hope in heaven and this sense of foreboding in hell. So maybe this is a kind of an encouraging one. And this is the will of him who sent me, that I should lose nothing of all that he has given me, but raise it up on the last day. For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who looks on the Son and believes in him should have eternal life, and I will raise him up on the last day. That's from John 6:39 through 40. Matthew 24:27. For as the lightning comes from the east and shines as far as the west, so will be the coming of the Son of God. I mean, clearly this imagery is laced throughout the book of the Great Divorce. Matthew 16:27. For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what they have done. Revelation 22:12. Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense with me to repay everyone for what he has done. So there's a sense of judgment here for everyone. Luke 21, verses 34 through 36. But watch yourselves, lest your hearts be weighed down with dissipation and drunkenness and the cares of this life, and that day come upon you suddenly like a trap. So you can see that day suddenly come upon you like a trap. For it will come upon all who dwell on the face of the whole earth. But stay awake at all times, praying that you may have the strength to escape all these things that are going to take place and to stand before the Son of God. John 14:3. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again, and I will take you to myself, and where I am, you may be also. So, 1 Peter or 2 Peter 3:10. This would be Matthew 24. I might be reading the text below, and so some of the ones I gave you, if you want to know, you can text me and let me know. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief in the night, and when the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and works that are done will be exposed. So, and then I'll close with this. This is from 1 Thessalonians. So I have been reading all the right ones for you, all the right references. 1 Thessalonians 4:16 and 17. For the Lord himself will descend from heaven with a cry of command, and the voice of an archangel, and with the sound of the trumpet of God, and the dead in Christ will rise first. Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, so that we will always be with him. So here are just some texts that I think that Lewis borrowed from that are wound throughout the whole of the book, and it's a part of the foundational premise of the book itself. So he's concluded his conversation, the conversation related to the dwarf and the tragedian and Sarah Smith. And then this happens in chapter 14. And suddenly all was changed. I saw a great assembly of gigantic forms, all motionless, all in deepest silence, standing forever about a little silver table and looking upon it. So this little silver table is time. It's symbolic of time. And on the table, there were little figures like chessmen who went to and fro doing this and that. That would be us. And I knew that each chessman was an eidolon, which is an appearance, a manifestation. And I knew that the chessman was an eidolon or puppet representative of some of the great presences that stood by. So you have these figures around the silver table, and each of those little figures on the table are representative of them in some way on the chess table, which is time. And the chess table functions as a chess table has always functioned, that there are pieces on it that are moved. And many of those pieces that are moved because of the chess master. And that the chess master, from the very beginning of a chess game, the chess master has a strategy about how he sees the game unfolding. But there are innumerable decisions that can be made for all those pieces to move about. So, in other words, he has a strategy, and he works toward, and the strategy is to win the chess game. And he has a very good idea about what each of he knows what all of those pieces can and cannot do. But But at the same time, while you have a chessboard and you have those pieces, and those pieces represent certain things they can or cannot do, on a chessboard, that you have the chess pieces who are moving themselves as well. So it's like this. For many people, when you talk about predestination, it's or when you talk about God's sovereignty, the idea is that God controls absolutely everything, every move, every thought. And while God is in control, God does not micromanage the world in which we live. So, the sovereignty of God is this: that 70 or 80 billion people, however many have lived on the planet since time began, can make all of the choices that they want to make, do everything that they want to do, and in the end, it still does not frustrate the plan, the providence, the purpose of God. We can all 70 billion. So if you took 70 billion people and you counted up each of the choices and decisions that all 70 billion people made, I don't even know what a number would be for that. It would be beyond scale, right? So if 70 billion people made choices throughout the course of their life, and you tallied them up, how many choices would that be? It's mind-boggling. You just couldn't come up with that number. And they made those choices according to who they were, what they're capable of, what they're not capable of, all those kinds of things. And they all exist on this silver table, and they all go back and forth making their choices and decisions and acting out. And it's still, so even though they have that kind of autonomy, that kind of free will, it's still does not have the ability to frustrate the plan of God. God's plan will still come to pass on that silver table with those unlimited choices and decisions each of those chess pieces make, and God's plan will still come to pass. And so that's kind of what he's getting at here. And the acts and the motions of each chessman were all a moving portrait, a mimicry or pantomime, which delineated the innermost nature of his giant master. So it's like this: you're looking back on what you did while you lived in time in that kind of a way. And these chessmen are men and women as they appear to themselves and to one another in this world. And the silver table is time. And those who stand and watch the immortal souls of those same men and women. Then vertigo and terror seized me, and clutching at my teacher, I said, "Is that the truth? Then all this that I have been seeing in this country is false? These conversations between the spirits and the ghosts, were they only the mimicry of choices that had really been made long ago?" So, so he's asking, is that real, what I see there, or what is that? And then MacDonald responds, or you might not as well say anticipations of a choice to be made at the end of all things. And so all these choices are being made. All these choices, all these choices that are there, some have been made and some have not. And you can anticipate what you think the outcome might be, but you can't do it with any degree of certainty. But you do better, MacDonald goes on to say neither. You saw the choices a bit more clearly than you could see them on earth. The lens that you're looking through was clearer, but it was still seen through the lens. Do not ask of a vision in a dream more than a vision in a dream can give. And so basically he's saying, understand this is the nature of how time works and those who live within time. All you see are pieces moving back and forth, but what you don't see is why they make those moves, why they make those choices, and what the final outcome will be. So just understand that's what it looks like. But if you're asking specifics, don't go there. Then the main character says, "A dream? Then am I not really here, sir?" MacDonald says, "No, son," he said, kindly taking my hand in his. "It is not so good as that. The bitter drink of death is still before you." So no, you're still alive. You are not dreaming. I mean, you're still alive, he's saying. But you're dreaming because I'm saying, but what you are doing now is you're dreaming. You have not died. And where you are now is a dream that you are currently having. And if you come to tell of what you have seen, make it plain that it was but a dream. You see that you make it very plain. Give no poor fool the pretext to think you are claiming knowledge of what no mortal knows. I'll have no Swedenborgs and no Van Owens among my children. Swedenborg was a Swedish philosopher and scientist and a mystic. And Van Owens was, who knew of Swedenborg, was as well. And so Van Owens was a rector, a pastor in the Anglican Church. As I said, Swedenborg was a philosopher, mathematician, of scientists. So he says, what he's saying to you says, I don't want you to be thinking like Swedenborg, or they were spiritualists, they were mystics. There wasn't any certainty in what it was that they were saying. So the main character says, "God forbid, sir," said I, trying to look very wise. MacDonald replied, "He has forbidden it. That's what I'm telling you." As he said this, he looked more Scotch than ever. I was gazing steadfastly on his face. The vision of the chessmen had faded, and once more the quiet woods and the cool light before sunrise were about us. Then, still looking at his face, I saw that there. So now we have this transition. So, yeah, I won't go back over it again because it's again, as I said, it's so dense. But now there's this transition from this discussion of time and how people act out in time and the myriad of decisions that each person can make with no certainty of how each one of those things will work themselves out. You cannot see it in exactly that kind of a way here and now. Then, still looking at his face, I saw that there was something that set a quiver through my whole body. I stood at the moment with my back to the east, which is where the sun would be coming up, and the mountains, and he, that is MacDonald, facing me. I looked towards them. His face was flushed with a new light. A fern 30 yards behind him turned golden. The eastern side of every tree grew bright. Shadows deepened, and so now the sun is rising. Now is the time of the second coming. All the time there had been bird noises, trillings, and chatterings, and the like. But now, suddenly, the full chorus was poured from every branch. Cocks were crowing. There was a music of hounds and horns. Above all this, 10,000 tongues of men and woodland angels, and the wood itself sang. It comes, they sang. Sleepers awake. It comes, it comes, it comes. One dreadful glance over my shoulder, I essayed. Not long enough to see, or did I see, the rim of the sunrise that shoots time dead with golden arrows and puts to flight all phantasmal shapes. So it's almost like time is stopping, and the way and the nature in which you understood time changes. The whole orientation changes monumentally. And so time is dead with golden arrows and puts to flight all phantasmal shapes. Screaming, I buried my face in the fold of my teacher's robe. The morning, I cried. And down in hell, they would be saying, the night is what they would be saying in hell simultaneously. I cried, I am caught by the morning and I am a ghost. But it was too late. The light, like solid blocks, intolerable of edge and weight, came thundering upon my head. Next moment, the folds of my teacher's garment were only the folds of an old ink-stained cloth on my study table, which I had pulled down with me as I fell from my chair. The blocks of light were only the books which I had pulled off with it, falling about my head. I awoke in a cold room, hunched on the floor, beside a black and empty grate like fireplace, the clock striking 3, and the siren howling overhead. So this was, for the main character, this was a dream that we've all, this was the sum and content of a dream that he had been having. But the dream came as a warning, this unbelievable warning to him about what might be. And in particular, the whole idea of the second coming. And now that he has this perspective, so Lewis is not saying this, that people can leave from hell and go to heaven and have a second chance. He's not necessarily saying that at all. He's simply presenting a hypothetical scenario as it was portrayed in a dream. And so what happens if we were given that second chance? And so all through the many encounters this main character had, while in his dream and talking to MacDonald and observing what was taking place, he had opportunity to be more decisive about becoming solid, about wanting to stay in heaven. But he continued to question and not to accept, at least right then, what was really real and what was truly true. And so as his dream goes on, then the Lord comes, and he is still a ghost, and he is terrified that as a ghost, in the full light of heaven, that he cannot maintain, and that he will be sent back to hell, which is why he cried and was terrified. So so it's like a warning, and it's a warning to all of us. What will happen if we are caught apart from Christ? If when he comes, number one, if we are not a believer, what happens to us? And number two, if we are a believer but engaged in sin, and not just a periodic sin, that is sin that's happening in the moment, but a season of sin, how does that mean we lose our salvation? Well, no, I don't think that's where he's going with it, but I think it does have a lot to do with how we are rewarded. And so so Lewis paints this very, I think, compelling image, creates this world that is very helpful, and that that functions as a warning to all of us, and especially to the unbeliever. What happens to you if, knowing what you know, having heard what you've heard, because if we're honest, it's pretty hard to go about this life and not hear anything about Jesus Christ on some level that's significant and meaningful, right? You almost have to work not to hear about Jesus and his great work upon the cross. But what if we go about life knowing what we know, seeing what we see in the same kind of way that this guy did, and still refuse, still do not, and then the Lord comes and we're in the light of God. And what is our destiny? What will happen to us? So I hope that that this chapter and this book functions for all of us as a warning, and that, like most of the phantoms or most of the ghosts end up back in hell, because even when given the opportunity, their hearts are so hardened that they cannot see the beauty and the truth of who Christ is and what he has done, and the promise of eternal life in heaven with God. And so our hearts become hardened to that. We want what we want. And so hopefully, this book functions as a kind of warning and provides helpful insight about what God requires of us. And that there's no arm twisting here. It's God revealing himself, saying, hey, this is who I am. These are the choices you will have to make. You could not make those choices unless I had revealed myself to you. But here I am. I've revealed myself. And now you know. Even in your sinful state, you can know. And in that sinful state, with my help, you can come to faith in Christ. So I think that, that is so much of what this book is getting at. And I hope that you found it to be helpful. So this will conclude this series today. And then I'm going to pick up another book down the road, maybe after the first of the year. And if there's a C.S. Lewis book that you feel like you'd like me to do, send me a text or an email, and I'm glad to consider it. I'm thinking right now about Mere Christianity. I think that classical apologetics are helpful, but I don't think that they are determinative. But I think that, Lewis's Mere Christianity falls under classical apologetics, the defense of the faith. So it's a good way just to fill out our understanding when we have conversations with people, when they ask us certain questions. That book can certainly help us in many respects and have come up with certain answers. So anyway, I hope this has been good. Feel free to share this. And thank you so much for joining me in this series. And really appreciate it. Okay. God bless. Take care. Bye-bye.